Hello. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I grew up in the Philippines and trained there first when I was seven under an RAD syllabus with my teacher Regina Vallejos. And then I went to the Philippine High School for the Arts for a couple of years in the Philippines on scholarship. After that, we moved to Texas and I trained at a few smaller studios in College Station, which is where my parents work at Texas A&M. Eventually, I was in the trainee program at Ballet Austin. And then after 3 years in the trainee program, I moved to Canada and I trained at l'École supérieure de ballet contemporain de Montreal. And after that year, I was hired into a new small company in Bratislava, Slovakia by Mario Radichovsky and was in that company for a couple of seasons. We had some, great rep. We did some tours around Europe, which was a really amazing experience. And then I moved back to Texas to kind of finish my degree that I had started at UT and just get back closer to family. And as I was finishing my degree at UT, I was teaching more at Ballet Austin and started teaching the fellows more. After I graduated with my English degree, I started helping Michelle Martin, our artistic director, stage work and assist choreographers who came in to choreograph or reset their work, restage their work. And yeah, I've been doing this. This is my fourth season in this position. Last year, my title officially changed to Ballet Master, which I think sounds really cool. But yeah, it's been great. So choreography, I guess I've always loved the creative part of dancing. I We started with a few improvised and choreographed things at Ballet Austin while I was a trainee, working with Thaddeus Davis. He kind of had us do more workshopping and more improv, which I enjoyed. Um, and in Montreal, we had a lot of time to work on composition and improvisation. But I didn't really start really making things in earnest until my second season at Ballet Bratislava, where kind of towards the end of the year, we had a little bit more time. Once all of the shows are set, you kind of just keep performing them. So we actually had quite a lot of time. And one of my colleagues, Tamash Sismadia, he wanted to create a piece that we would submit to the Festival of Choreographic Miniatures in Belgrade, Serbia. So it's a small competition. And we made a duet called Conflict, which I actually now wish that I had sent you some clips of that. But the whole piece is on my website as well. And yeah, it's a duet, and it's sort of very. I kind of love it because it is very much a miniature. It kind of tells a whole story, but I would say it's kind of more traditional in terms of the um, the structure of it and the narrative and the movement and the partnering. But I was really proud of that piece. I loved the movement in it and the music. We used music by Alexandra Desplat, and we actually won third in the competition. So that was really cool. That was our first piece of choreography, and we won. And so, uh, yeah, I was pretty happy with that. So that was my first, foray into really making a piece. My first work with the fellows was the one that you were in, actually, and that was more of a workshop showing presentation, but it was a great way to get started. It was through an NEA program with Michelle was also the other half of that, in that we were given some guidance from Stephen Mills, the artistic director of Ballet Austin, as to how to begin to workshop and how just finding our voices in terms of making work. And so I made the piece that Leo was in. That was called, I think it was called The Wacky Waving Inflatable, or Graveyard of Wacky Waving Inflatable Tube People, or something like that. It's such a long title, but I wanted it to be a long title. But it's a very quirky. I just was obsessed with the wavy, wacky inflatable tube creatures, and wanted to make a piece on that movement sensibility. So, yeah, they're called a lot of things. They're called wind socks, air dancers. Um, yeah, there's a lot of division as to what they're actually called. But well, yeah, if people don't know what they are, they're the ones that are like at the gas stations, or they're just, they have the air. I just think they're so beautiful to watch, but also kind of funny, which I think is why I was so drawn to it, because it strikes that line between, what I think are, things that are beautiful, but also have this quirkiness and absurdity. And so that was that first piece that I made with the fellows, with music by Joshua Piper and Elliot Fisher, who mixed it so that it had some sort of cartoony effects. Like I wanted it to be this whole thing. But the year after that was when I had a more concrete, fully formed piece commissioned by Ballet Austin called Climb Blue / The Void. And based on just so many ideas I was just so obsessed with the color blue, and particularly Yves Klein, who is an artist. He patented this color blue. And just had all these, he would paint these blue monochromes, and a quote from him that looking into the blue was like looking into another dimension. And so just thinking in the ideas of multi-dimensionality, that was kind of where I ended up landing with this piece. And there was a lot of personal research going into it, as well as getting to work with the fellows on workshopping the movement. And I had to talk with them a lot about sinking into the kind of world that they're living in. And it just was a really special piece, because I was very specific about the music that I chose, and had Jordan Moser, who also works at Ballet Austin, is also a former dancer, mix the music for me, so that it really, the sound and the lighting by Stephen Myers dropped you into this world that felt otherworldly but familiar, and of the past but of the present. Yeah, and I think you have that clip.
Yeah, I have that clip pulled up right now. And I'm going to stop it there. So, as you were starting to create this piece, do you choreograph chronologically as you're working, or is it kind of pulling from all over?
Yeah, it's not definitely not chronologically. I think I always, we just start kind of making up movement phrases. And oh, and I will say though that this video is from when we did it again. It was accepted into the Austin Dance Festival, and we were able to do it again the year after it was first made. So the video is from that second iteration.
Mm-hmm.
And a fun thing about the music is that it's like that repetitive thing is a record skipping, like it's from an old, and it's
Okay.
amplified and repeated sound. So I just thought that was interesting. But no, yeah, I don't really do things chronologically. Like things will be like I move things around as they were made. And this beginning, it was one of those like super cliche, like it came to me in a dream kind of things where just, I knew that I had these characters and they were very specific and they all kind of coexisted in the same places. But to me, some of them, like that one singular soloist can see the others, but the others can't see each other. And I wanted to have this like dropped in, like you were just plopped into this visual of what she's seeing and them coexisting in these dimensions. And so I had the clear idea of I have this trio with the three heads like doing their thing, and I had the
Yeah.
duet with the gentleman and the lady and another soloist man. And so they were very clear in my head, and I just kind of had this vision of, okay, they've got to be in the middle of doing something. And that's kind of that beginning. And this is actually also kind of like the ending but they're shifted a little bit. So kind of just like shifting a 3D cube around at the end, it's the same, but she's looking at it coming in. She just came in and looked at it again from a different angle. So, and it kind of similarly just drops out, like in the middle of their action is in black. So I was very clear about what I wanted it to feel like when you first got to the piece. So fast forwarding to the end here. Yeah, this ending is just one of my favorite things yeah.
Should we just play it from here?
Sure. Yeah, so
So
it's again that same. She's sort of looking at these entities of uh, and she's brought by to my mind is the Yves Klein sort of character, like the artist, the one who is kind of in control of certain elements.
it's so fun watching a piece like this and then having experienced your process before, specifically for the fact that there's this element of whimsy to it that makes the entire thing so enjoyable.
Yeah, that's definitely. I think that's one thing that is such a like with the windsock piece and with this is, and with this is I think I was happy to strike a little bit more of a balance with the poignancy of it, but also the whimsy and the sort of quirky. There's a section with the five ladies at the beginning that's a little bit quirky, because I think my work always ends up having a lot of levity and humor in it, because that's what I like, and that's what I want things that make you smile and kind of laugh and or giggle, which wasn't necessarily the case with that first piece that I talked about, conflict, because that was more of like a highly dramatic, like it was almost melodramatic duet where it is about love and loss and so I think, yeah, left to my own devices without a choreographic partner, I end up doing things that are usually pretty light.
So we have the opening from another piece that you made. And this one's called Play.
Yes, and play all caps because it's got to be like that. But this is the second piece that I was commissioned to do for the fellows, and this is a little bit of a shorter piece, like all in all. So it has less of a journey, I would say, but it is that same thing where I'm very clear about the world building and being specific with what place you're in, even though it's an abstract place. And so what if my sort of simple idea in this is that what if you're work was just to play all day, which it kind of is. As a choreographer and as a dancer, that kind of is your work. You get to just play. And so they have them in these colorful, work suits. They're like full jumpers. And I really wanted that. Costumes were one of the first things that dropped into my mind. And these are done by Benjamin Ridgway, who was our costumer at Ballet Master that year. And he did a great job with that vision of mine. The music for this, I think this whole piece ended up being like a game, and how we developed it too with the dancers was I had them play a lot of choreographic games or compositional games and actual games, and thinking about actual sports as they did it, and incorporating all of those little vocabularies into the piece, and making the sound design for me was also a game, because it's done through this app online called Incredibox, and you kind of drop these beatboxing guys, and you are able to save the music that you've made after. So it's kind of like dropping in the beats, you layer them onto each other, and it always does it in a very square way. So you can't mess it up. It's really not easy to mess it up. And so I also made the music for this one.
That's awesome. I'm gonna play this clip real quick, and then I have. Actually, let me back it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
This is so entertaining. I want to watch all of it.
Yeah.
So, with this piece, uh, again, you have a really kind of very clear starting point where you're dropping your audience into this very vivid visual. And then you're giving them this audio experience as well. How did you go about designing the kind of rhythmic pattern that went into this opening?
Well, a lot of it too was just kind of logistically knowing that I wanted them to be pretty together. So I'm like, we need some counts, and so that was that first thing. And again, same thing with the Klein Blue. I did not like the beginning and the end came at the end. Everything in the middle was created first, like all the movement phrasing, all the group stuff, the duets that happen in it were all created before. And then I kind of had to, once I had a clear sense of what the world is, okay, like what is the best way to, again, drop the audience into this? And the same thing, whereas they end up in these pairings. And so I just arrange them, kind of how I see where they need to start. And that's just where they have to be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also pretty decisive. I find that, and having assisted, a few choreographers now, I'm very, it's harder for me to change my own decision. I think once I've decided something, it sticks.
Yeah.
Whereas and it's different, and there's no one way to do it, obviously. So it's really interesting. I've observed a lot of choreographers who change their mind frequently, and you kind of like have to just keep up with what they want. And that's always great, because you see how specific it is and how those tweaks really make or break something. But for me, it's like I just have like that sense, and I already know this is what I want, and that's just what it's going to be. And
so you kind of have this running vision that allows you to make very decisive action over the course of.
Pretty much, yeah. And I think for the most part I can make, because I think, yeah, I guess it's almost from a lack of preciousness. Like I think, yeah, that's what it is. It's going to be fine. I think that's where it comes from. And maybe a little bit of impatience, but also just, I think I've just been a very decisive person generally. And the visions of choreographic work end up working that way for the most part as well.
So I'm going to jump a little bit into this piece real quick, just so they can kind of see how colorful and fun this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we want to play it from.
Yes.
So were there any specific tasks that were given to generate this movement, or is this primarily movement that you came up with yourself?
Some of it I came up with myself. But for example, that one game where they're kind of jumping over, they're like stacking and it gets progressively higher and they're jumping over. And I was so excited that Kelly could do a front walkover. I'm like, let's do the front walkover. And that's from a game that I grew up doing in the Philippines called Luksong Tinik, which means to jump over the thorns. So I kind of gave them that game, and then for them, I gave them, do some, I can't remember specifically what all the prompts are, but, do something that's from a game or from a sport. And they workshop these things together. I ended up shaping a lot of the duets a little bit more. I just need something to start from and mold from, but then of course just put into kind of mess with it and until I like it. So yeah, it's great because a lot of it ends up it's like kind of silly, but then they do these very technical things as well.
Yeah.
Like in somewhere in the middle there, it's a very puffy dance. I remember just them getting super winded at the end. It's 6 minutes of jumping, I'm like, all right, let's put a gargliad and some brises and, and so it ends up being quite a puffy piece. But then there's these little quirky, like gestural things, like what they end up doing on the floor. They're doing, rock, paper, scissors while they're doing some floor work. So things like that kind of pop in. Yeah.
So kind of heavy coordination cardio.
Yes, which is kind of, I guess, yeah, I'm super into that.
Are you still running a lot?
Yeah. So I running, I guess. I wasn't running a lot when I was dancing. But since I've been, doing less of that, I still take ballet class every day and stuff, but I love running, and especially now during this quarantine, I've been running a lot more, just because I don't have to fit in my exercise in an hour before I start my day or whatever, but I can go on these super long runs. So I've been running pretty much every other day, like 8 miles. It's been a little bit less this week or whenever it's a little bit busier, but yeah, it's I just love that feeling that you get from, having that sort of the endorphins. And I think that's something about this piece that I really found was fun, is that it makes you bop up and down in your seat. And it was a closer for this particular BA2 Butler Fellow show. And it was just so fun to see everyone like really into it and, like, oh, I want to do that. And just, it gets you. And that's exactly, that's what I want. I just want people to feel that happy feeling.
Yeah. So, as the process went on, specifically in this piece, do you find that you want to personally dance all these pieces that you're choreographing? Like, as you choreograph, is it specifically things that you would want to do yourself?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I hadn't really actually thought of that. I mean, I do. I love the movement within it, but I think that's kind of the great thing that I discovered about making pieces on other people is that you don't have to do it. You just get to watch it. I mean, I would. I like the movement. I would enjoy doing it, but I super enjoy watching it because I do go. I mean, I perform a lot. Lately, I've been performing for the past like 3 years. Been performing a lot of solo work on myself, and a lot of it is, I'll pre-choreograph something, but then I'll always leave certain things to improvisation just because I'm terrible at really remembering and sticking to something. But when it comes to my own stuff, which is weird, but also believing in the magic of improvisation and kind of trusting my body than my overthinking mind in most times. But I just know that going through it, like especially performing something where I really have to have this whole list of things that I want to do. I want to, really I think one of the clips that I sent you was from a recent one called Party Trick. I'm fun at parties, in which I really inserted as many of the like cool things that I had learned into it, and that piece was hard to do because there were certain like technical things and qualities that were more difficult to achieve, and you go through this every time, like as performers know this. I'm like, you're like, why do I do this to myself, right before that feeling of nerve, like. And I'm not typically a nervous person, especially when it comes to performing a group piece, but when it's a solo work, there's something that I just have to kind of get myself to do that. So I think, yeah, now more and more I enjoy watching other people do my stuff.
So this is a clip of Party Trick that you sent me.
Yes.
And we're gonna jump into that. I think this opening's really entertaining as well.
Yeah.
Like again, it's another really high impact. I'm
Oh,
not
is
sure
it
why
not
we're not
showing the
getting
video?
video.
Oops.
There it goes.
Oh, there it
We
is.
have video
Got
now.
it. I was like, wow, that's in the dark.
Yeah, I actually didn't have my mic on for the opening of this interview, so we might have to go back through and do a little bit of my intro again.
That's okay.
We're having some issues with video playback. This is unfortunate.
That's okay.
Moving on.
Yeah,
We'll
we
see if
can
we can
talk
get
about
that
it
back
too.
in a
It's
little
also
bit.
up on all of these are most of these are up in some form on my website. So, um, but yeah, this piece was I loved Danse Macabre by Camille Saint-Saëns, and it's such a powerful, big piece of music. And every time I make a new solo work, I have a certain list of pieces of music that I want to do it to. And so many times I had to put that one away because it was just too big for me. And so finally I felt like I had enough time to tackle it and give it what I felt that I wanted to do with it. And so this piece is jam packed with a lot of things that I had improvised that I relearned, and put together all these movement phrases. And it's about that sense of not like the introverted part of me, where it's like just going to the awkwardness of going somewhere, and just like ramping yourself up to go somewhere.
Hmm.
And that's that tension. That's what the piece is about. And so, yeah, it was a fun one. This was for the solo salon at First Street Studio last year, I think.
Hmm. So I just reloaded the video player, so I'm gonna give this one more try. And if videos still don't work, we might have to ditch the idea of doing videos and just talk for a while.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we are
Well, I
incapable of
can
doing video
describe
at
what
this
happens.
point.
I kind of I run in and I do this big crazy roll, and for the first few phrases of music, I'm actually just like flopped on the ground. So it's like this anticlimactic, like you expect something, and I
Like it's kind
just
of subverting expectation is
exactly
kind of the
totally.
primary focus. Yeah, I really loved this video specifically for that fact because the entire thing is a big act of subverting your expectation. You're expecting this massive, all encompassing movement, and it ends up being primarily a very large movement followed by the floor and a flop to the floor. And I
Yep.
think it's a really beautiful and kind of illustrates well the humor that you put into your work. Uh, I've seen you perform on numerous occasions. One of those times being it was in a small venue. It was more like a performance art piece. It was a series of like small little sketches. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
Was it loose gravel?
Yes,
Was it very cold?
it was. We were all wearing
Yeah, yeah.
jackets.
Okay, so that was the very first Frank Women Collective performance that we did, and that was yeah, that was a special show. I'm glad that you yeah, I'm so glad that you got to watch that actually, because yeah, that was the beginning of another really wonderful big commitment in my life, Frank Women Collective, which is a physical theater collective. And we didn't, at that point when we did that show, we weren't really even sure if we were going to be a thing. And then after that, we've now gone and produced 4 big shows, and have gotten progressively more interest and more, people really down for the specific kind of absurdity that it is. It's very, it's the best way of working because it's all Kelsey Oliver, who kind of was the brainchild of it all, brought on Roberto DiDonato and Chris Connard, who is a technical director.
Mm-hmm.
And the 4 of us are kind of like the main producers of the company, and it's a collective, and it's because it is kind of like a revolving door of people, but it's always, we're committed to doing as many disciplines as we can. So there's dancers, there's actors, there's musicians, there's singers, sound artists,
Mm-hmm.
and putting different types of people together with different interests and impulses and stirring the pot and kind of seeing what bubbles up. That's just that devised theater is so exciting, and a way that I hadn't worked so much of before. And yeah, now we've gone on to make stuff that I feel is really unique and really crosses that line with theater and dance and kind of cross-pollinated audiences and cross-pollinated interests. And Loose Gravel was at first, it's like a series of vignettes that were just some super ridiculous, some kind of poignant, and some, it was so fun. Like for example, one of my favorite sketches in that was they took this video of a woman yodeling, and they did a sexy sort of voguing with like wigs and high heels and
Hmm.
black fishnets, and they did it to the woman's like yodeling, and it's just the most hilarious, like those types of ridiculous juxtapositions, but also that are layered with so much thought and thinking about like deep social issues and um, just being our own person, and the broad spectrum of human experience, I think is a big thing that the Frankies end up talking about, and how we can all be weird, like all of us are weird, and all of us have different experiences and something different to offer. Yeah.
So I remember one of my favorite parts of that show specifically was actually not supposed to happen. In the
Uh-huh.
middle of a piece, the music went out, and simultaneously everyone starts counting to just continue through the sketch. And at the end of the show, the sudden, as we were talking, the sudden recognition that I had that that wasn't supposed to happen was astonishing.
Yeah.
Because for everyone in the audience, that was exactly on par with everything that had been going on the entire evening.
Yeah, that was amazing. So that was the one where we were doing this sort of like highly choreographed pelvic thrusting dance, and doing various things. Like my friend Dannon was writing a check, Kelsey was drinking her coffee, and I was eating a banana and another banana, and the music cut out because we had been using these. It was really cold for some weird reason. We just had a terrible cold snap, and we were in this tiny. It no longer exists, unfortunately, but it was called Topology. It's an artist
Mm-hmm.
space. And we even had a couple of propane heaters, but we were using a bunch of heaters backstage, and
It must have
just
been
short circuited, and
50
we lost the
degrees.
music, and Chris quickly was able to fix everything, thankfully. But that's kind of where, yeah, you're right in that it's on par with what Frank does, because we just like, I think that's why I like the like-minded value of the things that happen
Mm-hmm.
when you're improvising, and we all have that bravery and that trust in that something, we'll figure it out, and it'll be maybe even more interesting than what it was supposed to be. And I think just that, yeah, and again, a lack of preciousness on like, especially coming from, in a lot of ballet and a lot of things that are more stricter, it's like, oh, it has to go this way, it has to hit it just right, like this note just right.
Mm-hmm.
And that freedom from that, but still having that punchy, impressive virtuosity is something that I'm interested in, and that I've found a lot of comfort in.
Mm-hmm. So, as you were working on that, how does working on something like that differ from your process choreographing in a general sense?
Um, Definitely, they are definitely different, which is why I love working with Frank Women, because it pushes me a little bit to, to work outside of how I typically work. It's more devised, it's more collaborative, it's more about the playing. And to a certain extent, when I choreograph things, there is a lot of playing involved, but there also, for me, needs to be a lot more structure, especially eventually. So, and for that, it's more about anything that Frank has done. I have to speak really generally, but all of the four shows that we've done have been so different from each other in how they came about. But I would say that a lot of the times it's nailing the themes and the structure of what the big work is, and having some things that are choreographed within that, but not very many things that are choreographed. So
So,
there will
figuring out
be,
what the collective
short
voice
things.
is more.
Whereas in some of a lot of my work, it's not like that. It's a little bit more predetermined. But yeah.
So it's a lot of figuring out what the collective voice of the group is for a given show, and then progressing forward from there.
Sure. Yeah. That's definitely more of that. It's definitely really collective. Kelsey and Roberto, for the past couple of ones, have been a little bit more on the director's helm of things, which I think has tightened up a little bit. Our sort of message and the narrative of whatever something is, and given us a little bit more of anchors. I think we do like parameters. I think that's important to say.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely different because I'm more. I do like dancey things, and
Mhm.
Frank is really more physical theater. So far, we've been, we had one piece that we did that was more of a dancey thing, I guess, called Orifice. It was a trio with Kelsey Oliver and Erika Saucedo, and that had a little bit more phrase work in it. So that felt closer to making a piece that I would make, I would say.
Okay. So going back toward choreography, you've worked in a lot of different spaces and a lot of different environments. I know you've done pieces for museums and for um, more just for fun. Uh, that we were talking about you dancing in Marfa a little bit. Uh, Controversial dancing in Marfa. And when I say that, I mean that she was dancing in and around artwork that, let's say, there are multiple opinions on how concrete art should be used, and multiple opinions.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I've found that nowadays yeah, dancing anywhere is kind of big and it's more accepted. And I've loved being able to dance at museums. I've done quite a few of the Blanton Sound Space events. Steve Parker has had me do that. And just, yeah, I think interacting with something that's already there is in a different landscape is really interesting. And so this video that you're about to pull up is from Marfa with a trip that I took with my mom. We just took a weekend getaway to Marfa, and we did a self-guided tour of Donald Judd's concrete structures. And there are 15 concrete structures that are laid out beautifully in different configurations over the Marfa landscape. And since we were left to our own devices, I played around on each of them, and I have so many of these little videos that I love editing together. And this sort of plays into my relationship with Instagram as well, how much I love it as a platform for making little miniature choreographic creations, not just through the kinds of movement or you know improvised work, whether it be phrase work, but also like choreographing something through editing and framing. And yeah, so this is something that I still really love to do wherever. Is just make these little. I love the parameter of it's got to be short, it's got to be visually interesting. So yeah, this is from Marfa.
And hopefully video works. Yes, but we're out of proportion again.
That's okay.
There we go. So that is improvised. General assumption, but that is improvised. Um, when you're improvising in a space like that, what are the things that you're thinking about?
Not much. uh,
So more just
like
following your body.
yeah, and I think it's just I think there are little things that you end up thinking about. I mean, one of the things obviously that any improviser knows is trying to um, following something a little bit more fully. I think that's a hard thing about improvising sometimes is that it's easy to let go of something, but it's also okay to just like you know think about something else. So for me, it's occasionally battling with some of my habits or things that I end up doing over and over, of course, but also just, yeah, again, not being too precious about that. It's kind of like, yeah, it's okay. That's just how I move. And that's what I end up doing a lot is these sort of swirly things or, you know, um, but, yeah, and so for these, it was just about the play of the structure, and you see that in a lot of site-specific work, in just different ways that you can interact with what's there, and just being more open-minded to whatever can happen, and letting it go. I did, a workshop with Deborah Hay and Jess Zaret, and just a lot of classes that are improv based, and I think it is about letting go of your own expectations and just being available to what's next and yeah, so yeah, that is definitely improvised and just, yeah, playing around. I think for me it's all about play.
Mhm. So, have you ever put somebody else on stage improvising?
uh that's interesting because that's definitely not as often in work that I've set on other people. Although it because it really depends on, again, that trust and just putting it on someone to have that um be able to not judge themselves in the moment for whatever it is that they end up doing. A lot of what Dylan did for Climb Blue, going back to Climb Blue when we sort of resurrected it and brought it back to Austin Dance Festival, he, one of the fellows who was originally in that work, was no longer at Ballet Austin, so I replaced him with Dylan, who is a great improviser, and he had to learn the piece really quickly. So there were even more parts that I ended up having him improvise because I, trusted him to do that. And like,
Mhm.
the vocabulary of the piece, you can just go for it. So there were certain sections there that he was improvising. Another piece that I did with Taryn Lavery called Gnosis, which is, I think, for me, my deep desire to go into something that was just pretty, that was just about sparseness and beauty and the setting. And I know, I mean, she and I just work really well together, and she's just a gorgeous mover and improviser. So I had a whole piece of the Sati, the Gnossiens, which is why it's called Gnosis, and she improvised the whole piece of music along with me. Which again, I my only prompt to her was, pay attention to the music and the vocabulary that we've already introduced into the piece. So yeah, that's in there as well because I do think that improvising is really important. And in oh yeah, Kelsey Oliver too, my other half for Frank Women, we did. I wasn't able to send you a clip of this, but it's a piece that we did for the Blanton Museum called Swish Swizzle Smack about onomatopoeia. We kind of did this whole dance about onomatopoeia, and there were a few sections in there where quite a few that we were improvising because she and I just work really well together in that way, as we do with Frank Women. But yeah.
That's so cool. So, how have you seen your artistic voice change from the first piece you choreographed to now?
I think a little bit in the vocabulary, but not that much. I love straddling that line of classicism into more contemporary work, into more modern work, or but I would say, yeah, I think thematically. So, well, and conflict too was co-choreographed, so it wasn't necessarily like just mine. Um, but uh, but yeah, I think the humor has been a bigger sort of thing that I've done, even though I myself have deviated from it a little bit. Um, that's something. Yeah, I think I've leaned into the quirkiness even more.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, that's a hard question. It's hard. It's interesting to see, like, looking over the body of work. But yeah, I think I've leaned into a little bit more of the quirkiness and but continued to really explore what it means to be technical within a work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, one of the fun things with watching you dance specifically is that you make things appear manageable to mere mortals that in actuality if they tried them it would be a massive struggle. So there's this additional element of, ballet is designed for you to watch it and go, oh, there's no way I could possibly do that. And so a lot of your dancing, I find, is kind of the complete opposite, where it is equally, if not more, difficult to replicate, but it is much more human in that you can see yourself in it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something yeah, that I do like about my movement style is that I kind of I like I say this a lot and I make things kind of hard for myself. Sometimes, yeah, just wanting to do more things that are cool. And that's like but also being okay with showing the effort in that. Like uh yeah, and a lot of some of what's improvised, it's you just inevitably see what goes into it. Some of it looks really easy, or ends up looking easy, even though, um, they're not. But I also like the parts that look hard, that are hard.
Yeah. So, if you had one goal over the course of your choreographic career in terms of uh, your overall vision, what does that look like?
um, Oh man, that's kind of a that's
I know
a it's
that's like
a
big
hard
question.
thing. I think I just like I would love to keep doing, keep getting to do what I do. I've loved to do these miniature things, but I haven't done a full length, a big full length work.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a goal, but that I can see myself doing in the future. Um, uh, just yeah, being able to pull together a longer work that also doesn't feel like it's demanding too much of your attention, because again I think that's something about my work. It's more inviting, and it's not imposing you to like do anything. It's there for you to enjoy and take in and think about and ponder. But yeah, so doing a more full, I'd love to do like a ballet. That's something that I've been thinking about is bringing in more non-Eurocentric narratives into short story ballets. Um, we do a lot of those ballets for the second company at Ballet Austin, and so I kind of know the formula of what it needs. It's helpful that they're an hour long because that's how much the kids can focus, and
Yeah.
it has to have a lot of nice dancing that's also technical, but have a lot of really funny parts as well. And growing up in the Philippines, I have this slew of Philippine folk tales, or folk creatures and things like that I have been thinking about. And so that's maybe one of the bigger project oriented goals is to make a little children's ballet on a Philippine folk story.
That sounds really interesting, and I'd love to see it. Let's
Yeah,
think about a
hopefully
little.
they'll eventually get to do
Yeah,
it.
let's think about a little rephrasing of that question, though. What do you hope for the lasting impression of your catalog of work to be?
Ah, so definitely, yeah. Well,
I know,
I
hitting you
wanted
with
to,
those
I
hard
wanted to
questions.
be um, entertaining, really. I mean, that maybe it's funny because entertainment sometimes people make it out to be like this sort of a cheaper word or something, but it is. It's for me, art is something that you look to for escape, that you look to for um, you know a alternate perspective or insight, and yeah, so that's I think the fact that I could make people smile is a big thing, that I'm happy to do.
So, how tight are we on time at this point? Because we are about to hit 1 o'clock.
Oh yeah, so I do have to leave soon. but
Unfortunate. But what do you have planned next? What are you hoping to do in the near future as restrictions are slowly lifted?
just getting back into doing some work. We've had a few, we canceled some Frank Women shows. Had to cancel the Performa Dance show, which is Jennifer Hart's
Mm-hmm.
company here that I also perform with some, yeah, she's a great choreographer and I have loved working with her over the years. So just hoping to get back into those rehearsals. Creation wise, I would love to get back and do some workshopping, maybe with the fellows eventually. Just again, getting my stuff on other people because now I've had a lot of opportunity to do stuff with my own body in solo work, and I would love to be able to put that on somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. So I think sorry, I just interrupted. What was that?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, and just to to be able to shape things more and yeah, be able to share things and maybe being more creative with where those can happen. But yeah.
So I just want to do like the little opening introduction again because I know that they got what you said. I know that they could hear that, but they couldn't hear what I said.
Oh
So
no.
the way that we know each other is I was a Butler Fellow several years ago, and I got to work with Alexa for an entire year. And during that year, she set a piece on me and was directly involved in a massive portion of the work we did over the course of that year. Um,
Yeah, it was great to work with you and you were part of a really special opening into my further choreographic career. So I'm glad that we can reunite in this way.
yeah, I hope that we get to work again in the future.
Yes.
I mean, who knows when I'll be in Austin again? Could be sooner rather than later. Who knows?
Yeah, hopefully we'll see.
But I will catch you next time. I will be right here again next week for an interview at noon on Thursday, every single week for the foreseeable future. Thank you for
Thanks so
coming
much.
on this week, Alexa.
They're mowing the grass outside. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. See you later.
Talk really loud.
Bye.
Are we done? Are we out?